Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Full Throttle Moto 31. I am DJ St. Marc at Call All Beings on Twitter, also known as X. Man, I was so compelled with the news that's gone down this weekend relative to free agency. I just had to write something for you. So that is what brings me in here today. And I just thought it was so interesting. So, without further ado, man, we're all part of this sport as fans. I mean, no matter which sort of end of this you're in, you're either a fan, a journalist, someone that's in the organization on the technical aspect or the promotional aspect, or you're a rider, or you're involved in Dorna, but it's our sport. And man, what an amazing, beautiful thing that it is. I wonder if we could get this background in here. Can we? I guess we can. It's not showing it because my background is in here. So I'm going to have to make my background this. Got to see if I can do that. And let me see. Maybe I can do that. Maybe I can make the background that FTM 31 business. Give me a second here. This is my background from my other show, which is not what I want here. So give me a second, and then we're going to get into we'll get into some discussion here. I've got a bunch of things written for you regarding free agency and so forth that I think you'll find intriguing. So just give me a second. There we go. The Bana. Yeah, this might do it right here. As a background. There we go. That looks better. Now we're at the track. This is better. Okay. Forgive those glasses. Brother's got to be able to read. I need to get these with the prescription lenses. I think I told you that last time. So there we are. Okay. Got the proper full throttle 31 background. Okay. So this weekend, we were waiting for a shoe to drop. Who is going to be the new rider at Factory Ducati? And that, of course, would inform who is going to fall into place in essentially the rest of the entire rest of the grid. So we're waiting to find out who will be in that Factory Ducati seat. Will it be Marc Marquez? Will it be the very deserving Jorge Martin? And all's fair in love, war, and in business. And so therefore, I don't know that they necessarily care what we think is fair or who should have the seat, because if you're just going by service to Ducati and the amount of wins that they've gotten, it goes to Jorge Martin. I mean, I picked him at the beginning of the season, but there are a lot of things to look at that I, as a layperson, haven't looked at and don't know. So let's look right here. Okay. So silly season shoes that have dropped. So the first shoe was when Marc Marquez revealed, I believe it was during the pre-race interview with the media there at MotoGP. He said that going to another satellite team is not an option. Why would I think it was, and then unquote, and then I think there was something analogous to, why would I go from one satellite team to the other? While earlier he had revealed at some point that he has 3 options. So at that time, one would have assumed that Factory Ducati would be one. And so some of you might ask, well, why wouldn't he just ask for a factory machine at Gresini? But that presumed that Pramac wouldn't stay with Ducati, because then Ducati would have to go against its earlier statement that the only other team getting factory machinery would be Pramac. So they would have to go against that and then give Marc a 2025 machine next year if he were just under these auspices. And then what about the rider next to him? Do they also get a 2025 machine? I mean, I don't know that the factory wants to support all those machines. So that becomes an issue. The other thing was, obviously factory KTM was the other one, and then so some other shoes dropped that we'll get to. And factory Aprilia was the other ones, was the other factory there. So with the retirement of Aleix, and presumably they would want to keep Maverick, who's been in the program for it'll be 3 years now. By that time, they would presumably want to keep him someone who's familiar and knows the team, likes the team likes him. So one of the things that we have to realize is that these riders are competitive in everything. No matter what we're talking about, they're competitive. So if you think, or we thought, that Marc just is going to concede the 2025 factory seat just because conventional wisdom says Jorge has earned it, think again. Because Marc will look at it as perhaps he's competing with Jorge for that seat. They made that clear, or they would have already announced that it's going to be Jorge. Clearly, they wanted to see some results to inform that decision. And for all we know, they may be leaning this weekend on seeing what the data reveals this weekend and actual results this weekend to decide who is going to be sitting next to Pecco on that factory Ducati next season. So this is just an example. Let's see. So they're competing. And even if he didn't want it, he wants to be offered that seat. Even if he had other ideas, he feels like he's competing for that seat. And you could clearly see that he is ready to take on any situation that regards him riding a motorcycle on a racetrack and will not feel pressure. He's going to go out and ride like Marc and do Marc things, whatever those things are. And they're not necessarily the Marc things that he was doing in 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, up until the accident. And perhaps even how much gusto he came back with after the accident, trying to come back. But he's going to do 2024 Marc things, whatever those things are. All right, so the first shoe dropped was Marc. The second shoe that dropped after that was Pramac confirming that they will remain with factory Ducati equipment for 2025. So, okay, wow. Now that takes, now the idea that Pramac would leave and then the two other factory bikes could go to Grassini, a lot of people's heads were turning going, oh, well, maybe he just stays on there and he stays with that bike, Other people have postulated that perhaps Marc wanted to go to factory KTM because he said he wanted to be a factory. That gives you three choices because obviously he's not going to be Yamaha and it's not going to be Honda, even though people are going, oh, I think he wants to go back to Honda next year. This is all just a ruse. Yeah, right. He wants to go back to Honda. He wasn't going back to Honda until they're passing him on the track. That's when he'll want to go back to Honda. I mean, that's my opinion. So I never believed that for a second. Then, so the third shoe dropped regarding KTM when they revealed that Pedro Acosta was signed during the broadcast today. Pedro signed with factory KTM. He will be on Jack's bike next year. And then, obviously, the next question that I think Matt Burt and company reported on the broadcast, the MotoGP broadcast, was who will be Pedro's teammate. And some official at KTM told them, or it may have been Jack Appleyard of the MotoGP broadcast, that, in fact, Brad will be Pedro's teammate next year. So there you go. So that's another factory now that's not a player. So now and then there were two. There was Ducati and Aprilia. So, so what else do I have there? Yeah, Brad will be Pedro's teammate and not an option. But will there be a change of heart, and is gas an option? Because if Marc were to change his mind and gas is an option, you're getting a factory bike. But I think we'll get into a little later why we believe at least that he wants the factory Ducati bike in particular, or a factory in particular. Let's talk about Factory Aprilia. Factory Aprilia. We presume this is still an option for Marc. This is a package that I have heard Simon Crafar and Peter Baum of Oxley Baum podcast rave about on many occasions. How wonderful that bike is and how it's stuck to the track and it's on rails and has wonderful corner speed. And apparently they're talking about at this particular track that they're being passed by Ducati. I think you saw that in this race. Marc may have even passed one of the Aprilia riders. I'd have to check on that. Certainly Brad did. So will Factory Aprilia be a factor for Marc? Well, one of the things that Peter Baum has talked about consistently is race day issues. And I believe Simon Crafar has mentioned that as well, is they have a beautiful package. The bike is amazing, but somehow they'll sort of find a way to use a British term to cock it up on race day. And that's an issue. Would that scare away Marc? I think it would scare him away if he felt like he had a better option, and it wouldn't if he didn't feel like he had a better option. All right, so remain at Gresini and receive a 25 and compete on year-old machinery. So, if you're Ducati, why would you want to pony up another 2025 bike and the support that would go along with that bike? Because now you're going to have essentially two different bikes in the garages for another satellite rider who could potentially unseat their champion on factory equipment. I don't know why they would want to do that. I mean, I think they're enjoying it this year, but I think ultimately they feel that Pecco's amazing riding and knowledge and steadiness on that bike and the ability to take what's given to him, meaning he'll get a lead and he'll be able to maintain it. I mean, the fact that we'll talk about it when we talk about the race today. The fact that he fell last week, everybody's done that. Marc did it at Coda, said it was the brakes. Jorge's done it, Enea's done it, Fabio's. Everybody. That's our sport. That happens. So Pecco is just an amazing, precise rider. Is he better than Marc? I don't think that he's a better rider than Marc, and I think it probably piques their interest to wonder what would Marc do with their factory, with all their staff and engineers, and that's kind of where we're going next. And then we'll come back to Gresini in terms of free agency here in a minute. What Marc knows. Marc knows that the litany of engineers and tech personnel that are not visible to us on TV, but those of you who are in the paddock, you do know that these people exist. They are behind the garage dividers and are amazingly effective at giving Pecco the best setups for that bike for every track, as evidenced by some of the subpar Fridays and Saturdays that he's had, which will conclude within a dominant win on Sunday. So those guys can, first of all, they have a better, faster bike for 2024 than they had in 2023, which was a dominant bike. And we could also, that's something we could revisit later when we talk about Bez and some of the other riders. But there's a clear distinction between the bike and all of the tech person and engineers behind it. So even if you have a Marc Marquez, he's going to have, as you see, a very difficult time getting around those guys who, even if they're not exactly equal to him and maybe he's a little bit better than they are, well, they have a better motorcycle, a faster motorcycle. Clearly it has more top speed and a litany of engineers that exist that are, I've heard any numbers of anywhere to 25 to 30 people that are, let's call them backstage there, that are engineering for those bikes. And it maybe is, more than double what he would have at his disposal. And all those people are trying to figure out and crunch every piece of data and figure out how they can extract the most out of that motorcycle to essentially to beat all of these last year Ducatis that they've doled out to four bikes to two other teams. And obviously they're very successful at it. Are the riders great? Yes. but I think you could switch the riders and you would see a very similar result if perhaps if you had Marc and Jorge on the factory bike and you had Enea and Pecco on the 23 bikes. I think you would see very similar results. And obviously Jorge's on a better machine than Marc is on. But I just think that they can make a difference. And you know what? It's not only me who thinks that. Marc also thinks that, which is why he said he wants a factory machine, because he knows that as much fun as he's have doing the cool little dances and celebrations at Cressini, he wants the best engineers and technicians and analysts and data people behind him in the garage. And he knows that more than likely is factory Ducati. And if it's not, then it's another factory like KTM, etc., or maybe to a lesser degree Aprilia. And when I say that, I don't mean that, I'm not prepared to be able to judge these bikes, but just what you hear is they seem to have some race day issues that have resulted not in them not extracting all the performance out of that bike due to just their performances on race day. I think my cat is trying to get in here, so I may have to open the door. If you can excuse moi for one moment. I got 3 cats. And unfortunately, the one that wasn't in here is the one that wants to come in. So I'm back. Okay, so let's keep going on down the line, because if you watched the show last time, you'll know it gets better as we go along. It's not easy. I'm used to having co-hosts, and it's not as easy to do a great show when you don't have co-hosts. But I did write quite a bit of material for this. All right. So yeah, basically, according to Marc's own words, now he has 2 options. We discussed those. Those are factory Ducati or factory Aprilia. All this, we haven't even spoken about another rider yet, but we will. And depending upon what's offered, Marc could change his tune. Does he want to go to a new team and have a completely new team that he has to interact with this year? I don't know that he wants to do that. We don't know. Is that a thing? None of us could know what he's prepared to put up with. So, okay, let's go on to Jorge Martin, the amazing rider who is leading this championship, although I guess Pecco has closed the gap somewhat today. Jorge Martin, we presume that Martin will either get an offer from factory Ducati or he'll have ostensibly one option, factory Aprilia. And the reason is because KTM says that they already have both their factory riders for next year. The 2 Japanese manufacturers, certainly bikes that all of us have owned and loved, Yamaha and Honda, are not an option at this point. Even if they were offered, Jorge Martin, I don't believe would go to either of those bikes. So gas. I think that Joan Mir will be one of the suitors for this bike. I don't know that he signed through next year, but I know he said he would be interested. I think I've heard that he has courted a couple of manufacturers. And if they decide not to bring back, well, obviously they're not going to bring back Jack, who said he would be interested in gas, or Augusto. I think they would be looking at free agents like Digia, like Bez, like Enea. I think those would be choices potentially for gas, although I think that VR46 would probably be wise to sign those 2 guys. Do you think Celestino Vietti is going to come up from Moto2 and displace one of those guys in VR46? I really don't think so. I don't think that the performances are there, and frankly, from my layperson eye, I don't see the talent of Celestino being better than these 2 guys. So gas will be really interesting. So if you're gas, you would be interested in all of these guys. You would be interested in Anea. You would be interested in Bez. You would be interested in Digia. I think you would be less interested in Frankie Morbidelli, but what if he has a great rest of the year? Look where he finished today. I mean, he finished 4th today. I think he qualified 7th, but ended up 4th. So when people have the fire under them and they really start to perform, as you saw Digia do last year, you're seeing Miguel's performance, Oliveira sort of starting to percolate a little bit, and then maybe the same in Morbidelli. So I think all the Gas will be interested in those riders. I don't think Augusto will be there anymore. I think you could make a good argument that he should get another year, but I think one of those seats will be open, and I'm not sure why you would want Jack Miller in one of those seats. I would think that I would want one of these younger riders that's shown a lot of potential, and I think Digia and Bezzecchi, and certainly the 2020 champion Joan Mir, are people that I would really consider, and I think Joan Mir will go after that gas seat that's being vacated by Pedro. Gresini. Let's talk about Gresini Ducati for a second. I think it's a 50-50 that they bring back Alex Marquez. Whomever, I mean, obviously they're going to pair him with Fermin Aldeguer. I think that's where Fermin is going to be. I don't know that he would move up to a Pramac seat. There could be 2 Pramac seats open. So it all depends on who gets that factory and if Marc changes his mind. So, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But with Gresini, you know that you don't have Bez and you don't have Digia that are going to fight for that Gresini seat. So you know those seats, that one of those seats will be open, but you won't have either of the VR46 guys vying for that unless there is some sort of fallout and one of them leaves. I don't know why you would leave VR46 and go to Gresini. Stranger things have happened, but that's sort of, I think you're going to have somebody who's fallen out will try to get that seat. Let's talk about Pramac here. This seat could go to Marquez if he ends up having a change of heart, if he isn't chosen for factory Ducati, but he may want to prove I can outride all the factory's engineering prowess just by virtue of having that motorcycle. I think that's possible. He could keep his Red Bull sponsorship and all that stuff, and he's going to have some factory support, and he's going to have the 2025 package, and he may want to be a guy that says, you know what, if Jorge doesn't win the title this year, I want to be the first one to win on an independent bike in who knows how many years. It's possible. It's even though he said no, I wouldn't want to do that. I think we should leave that open as a possibility, and if he's pissed off enough. So that second seat could likely go to the next best 2023 Ducati rider, which right now it looks like it's Digia. Possibly Mir would also be interested in that ride. So Mir is basically a contender for any of the top rides because it's basically going to go Marc, Jorge, and then Joan Mir. So any bike that's not occupied by the other two, you have to look at Joan Mir as a number one contender potentially for those bikes. Could be Morbidelli. What if Morbidelli really, really turns it up for the next 2/3 of the season? If that's the case, Morbidelli could be on it, or we could see 2 brand new riders on Prima Pramac Racing next year. And I'm going to go ahead and assume that that's what's going to happen, that you'll see two new riders there. Let's go to Trackhouse Racing now. Man, it sucks to say this, but I'm going to analyze this the way that I analyzed MMA when I was covering MMA. I don't think Miguel will be there. He does have that sort of lighter under his backside right now, where you may see his performances go up, just in the same way you saw happen to Digia, just as you see Enea. When Enea all of a sudden found out earlier in the year, oh my God, I'm actually fighting for my life with this seat. I know I was injured last year, but I may not, even though I may not get this seat next year. It could go to Jorge Martin, and now look at Marc Marquez. And now, you see Enea's performances go way up. And even though he made a mistake today, his performances may still go up. So I think when you look at Prima Pramac, you could see any one of you could see Enea going there, because he's obviously not going to be chosen for the he's not going to be chosen for the factory Ducati seat, and likely the Aprilia seat will go to either Jorge or Marc, potentially. We don't really have a good feel for how Marc feels about A, Aprilia, and B, just switching teams in general. But if I had to make an assumption, I would assume that he's liking this Ducati bike. If you read between the lines of what he says, I think he wants to stay with this bike, and he just wants to get the latest equipment and get everything behind him. And I think that's why he's competing. He's made it clear that he's competing for this factory seat. But you'd be an idiot to say, I want to be on the factory team. You're going to say, you need to say, I want to be on a factory bike. And that way, Ducati will think that, okay, he's open to KTM and he's open to Aprilia. The problem for Marc is that he was just undercut. He was undercut because KTM just announced that, or I don't know if this has been an official announcement, but they said on the broadcast that Brad will be in factory KTM next year. That's one, so that improves the bargaining position of factory Ducati right now. So back to Trackhouse Racing. I believe Miguel will be gone. I believe Raul will remain. Certainly, as I said, there's been a fire lit under Miguel last week or so, but the theory is we sort of know what Miguel's potential is. 5 victories in 90 races. Basically 6 in Moto 2, 6 in Moto 3. And I think that's right. I have to go back in and look him up again. Oliveira. Where is that guy? Yeah, it says he has 220 total races. He's had 90 races in MotoGP, whereby he's had 5 victories, 7 podiums. I mean, so, he's had better results than Aleix did, who stayed here for, 14 years. But I don't think people are going to get that long anymore. I don't think you have that much time to produce results in modern day MotoGP. So by year's end, he'll be over 100 races. So a lot of it, could depend on then, or they may decide now what they're going to, do. But I think that Raul, I think we kind of know what Miguel's potential is and what he's likely to do in the future. And I don't think he's going to all of a sudden, either this year or next year, turn into this amazing rider that starts thrashing the Ducatis with his Aprilia. I really don't think that. I think we don't know what we have yet in Raul, but I think the potential looks really, really good. And if I were the owner of their team, I would probably seek to keep Raul, and I would probably move somebody else into Trackhouse Racing. And that could be, again, any of those guys who aren't those top tier guys that are going to get a factory. Any of those guys could be a Trackhouse rider. They have could that be Joe Roberts? It could be. It's kind of like an investment, kind of like, getting into sort of day trading with Joe Roberts, whereas if they put a proven rider, any one of those guys that we mentioned that are on a Ducati that doesn't have a ride, you have more of a sure bet on your team. So if one of those other two, for example, just to make an example, I don't think Bastianini would switch manufacturers. I think he would go to an empty Pramac seat if they would have him before he would switch over to an Aprilia if all the factory rides are taken. That's my opinion. But if he did, I would think he would look good sitting next to Raul on that bike. I also, as an American, I would love to see Joe Roberts get a shot. You just don't know what you're going to get. You would bring up Joe Roberts and you would have no idea what kind of performance you're going to get. And you would have to assume that for the first year you would get nothing, and you would hope by the second year he would be good. It took him several years to get really good in Moto 2. So, I mean, if you're asking me, I'll take Joe Roberts. But, if I'm Justin Marks, you notice that his language has been such that he really won't commit to Joe Roberts. So that's my opinion, what I think is going to happen in Trackhouse. But I think one of those guys will be gone, and I don't think it's going to be Raul. Factory Yamaha. Well, they lost out on the opportunity to get Pramac as a satellite team. They'll likely re-sign Alex or whomever wants the money more than somebody else. So they certainly are not going to get a Joan Mir. That's not going to happen. So you're likely going to get one of the other riders who fell out, who didn't have a team, and they throw a bunch of money at one of those other riders. That could just be them remaining with Alex Rins. Or it could be somebody else. Because I think this is Alex's first year on the bike. So I'm pretty sure he's signed through next year. So I think Alex Rins stays. Because this is his first year after leaving LCR Honda. This is his first year in Yamaha. So I believe he's on a 2-year contract. So I don't think anything changes with Factory Yamaha. Factory Honda, likely Ayagura will come up and replace Takasan. Joan Mir will be departing. And that opens up one spot. Well, yeah, it opens up one spot because the other spot is Joan Mir, and I think he's gone. I'm sorry, make sure I have that correct. Yeah, the factory riders are Joan and Luca Marini, if I'm not mistaken. So I need to go back to my... Oh, I have a JPEG, actually, I have a JPEG of the silly season, the lineup. Yeah. So Marini and Mir is going to vacate that spot. So yeah, I would assume Ayagura will, he might go to LCR Honda. So I don't know. I don't know if they would put him directly on a factory Honda. I mean, it just depends. I mean, he is a Japanese rider. After all, in their Japanese company, they, certainly they want to see someone from their country on their motorcycle. So it's only just that Spain doesn't happen to have a MotoGP worthy motorcycle, or they would have a Spanish rider every year. There's so many great Spanish riders out there. So yeah, so it may be just that it may be just, let's see, let me go to LCR real quick. I don't know why I'm brain flatulating. Yeah, so it's Taka. So yeah, if Taka leaves, I mean, you just have to assume they move Ayaguro right there next to Johan Zarco, and that would be or Johan Zarco. I want to make sure I'm saying that correctly, and that just makes sense. I mean, and then on the factory team, that would open up a spot on the factory team because I think Joan Mir is out of there. So that they could pitch that to somebody who wants some money. And let's see, LCR again. Yeah. So I think we went over that, but you could see Augusto, Miguel, Jack, any of these guys could be a player for the seat that's vacated. So you could see Johan Zarco make a run for that factory seat because right now he's the best Honda rider that they have. So he could make a pitch for that seat and have two seats open at LCR Honda, and that could be any one of these riders who falls out. It could be Augusto, it could be Miguel, could be Jack, right alongside an Ayogura. That's kind of how I would assume that would go. That comes to the end of my notes show right there. Kind of a quick 30 minutes looking at the results from today. The sprint race. So obviously the podium was Bagnaia with another amazing ride. He said it was real sketchy the last 2 laps with the amount of grip that he had, but he held it together, which I had no doubt that he would. And then Marc Marquez passed Jorge. So I don't know what was going on. Jorge was just out of sorts today, probably, which is why he went down. I mean, you wouldn't think that on a normal day that you would have seen Marc pass Jorge. I wouldn't have expected to see that, but it's Marc Marquez. Pedro was the benefactor of Jorge falling out on that lap. I think, where did Jorge fell out on the 7 laps in of the and I don't know how many total laps they did. It couldn't have been very many with the size of this circuit. It couldn't have been more than like 10 laps because the circuit is so big. But anyway, so after that, Morbidelli with an amazing performance. He qualified in 6th. Showing their position. Oh, I'm sorry. Where did let me look at where he qualified real quick. Morbidelli qualified in 6th. And Marc was in 4th. Yeah, it was in the qualifying. It was Jorge, Bagnaia, Vinales, Marquez, Bastianini, Morbidelli, Acosta, Marquez, Espargaro, and Rins rounding out the top 10, which is pretty awesome. And Raul was just outside of that. Raul and Miguel. It was Miguel first in 11th and Raul in 12th. Really incredible. Things that are interesting, Brad ended up recovering to 6th today, which is pretty amazing. You obviously, as a pop psychologist, you have to wonder how the performances that Pedro is having, how they affect Brad, and if it's a problem and it's a difficulty this year, what's it going to look like next year when he's in the same garage as Brad? I don't know, but it's certainly something to think about. He obviously felt, he said he had a moment today coming over the crest, but he got himself reined in and didn't make the same mistake as he made last year. As you go down through there, you see Morbidelli had his most amazing ride of the season. Vinales, he talked about the power today. He seemed to have an issue that he didn't have the straight line speed and power that he had. Although recently we saw those guys overtake the Ducatis on one track. I'm trying to remember what race that was, but that's what Maverick said, and so we have to take it. He finished 7.6 seconds back of Bagnaia. The aforementioned Brad, very surprising to see him, the way that he fell back. I mean, at one point I think he was in 3rd, and then people started passing him, not the least of which was Pedro. After that, Digia, has had, the best season, I think, of any of the guys other than Marc on this bike. He's had more points than Bez and everybody else. He got 3 points today. Behind him, Alex Marquez. Don't know where he's going to be, if he's going to stay at Gresini or if he's going to take one of those other motorcycles. I know he didn't like being on a Honda, so I think Alex Marquez will market himself if he doesn't stay on Gresini. And I'm not sure why you would change that seat, because you would think he would be okay, working with Fermin Aldeguer, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of guys that are heads and shoulders above him. But what if Bastianini became available? They might look at it and want Bastianini back there. It's really hard to say. Aleix was ninth. He had the last point. He got 1 point for today. And then Raul in 10th. He didn't score today, but just looking better and better, as I said. Bez 11th. Jack Miller 12th. Nothing really needs to be said. Simon Patterson's been saying it all year, and Jack obviously acknowledges it and knows it. Simon thought he would be better for World Superbike on a Ducati. I would tend to agree, but guess what? Jack doesn't see it that way. Despite not wanting to be away from his family, I think it represents something to him to be on this grid, and maybe the pay is better. I don't know. But obviously, he never mentioned going to Superbike. He mentioned that he would have no problem going to Gas, and who would? You're going to get a factory bike and have a great team over there, too. Alex Rins in 13th. Paul Espargaro finished ahead of all the riders all the riders except Alex that were on either a Honda or a Yamaha. And that's because Fabio crashed out, unfortunately. Fabio doesn't crash very much, but it looks like at this track, your margins is such a high-speed track. So after Paul, you had Johan Zarco, Taka, Augusto in 17th, Lorenzo Salvadori, the test rider for Aprilia in 18th, and sadly, Luca Marini, who was a contender in a lot of races last year and finished well inside the top 10, was in 19th, and now he's finding himself at the back of the grid, so he obviously has not come to terms with whatever Honda's putting out there right now. And crashed out was Jorge Martin at 7 laps, Joan Mir at 4 laps, and I think all those crashes are probably why he wants to leave. Bastianini in 2 laps in. Miguel, 1 lap in, he had that mashup with Quartararo. I didn't see what happens. I haven't seen the video to understand what happened. But obviously Quartararo wanted to talk to the stewards about it, and it seems like it was Miguel's fault. So anyway, looking forward to tomorrow. Should be an amazing race. And unfortunately, we kind of know that we're going to be probably looking at some amalgam of Pecco, Marc, Jorge, and, maybe Pedro, unless something crazy happens. That's kind of like who's been up there every week. But, Maverick said, if they can get something dialed in, he was in 5th. He was 7 seconds back of Bagnaia. And then Pedro was 4 seconds back. Morbidelli was 5 seconds back. So, there's not a whole lot between them. Marc was only 1.4 back of Bagnaia, but couldn't close the gap on that. And Bagnaia did phenomenal to hold everybody off and up his pace when he had to in those last couple of laps. Very, very, very interesting stuff that's about to happen here. We're seeing that we kind of know who's going to be in front every race, and that is a virtue of the manufacturer. And I think they're hoping that it will be more the rider when these new rules go into effect, which is essentially, 2 years from now. So, because we have a whole nother 25 season and a 26 season before we even see the first, 850 out on track. So I think that's what the trade-off's going to be. And then we'll see, what tech can be innovated that doesn't already exist, that they can write language for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to make those bikes. I'm sure they want to see more parity in the motorcycles so that the rider can have more input on it. Because right now it seems like, well, if you give someone this motorcycle, you're taking, well, here's an example, Morbidelli, he was in the back of the pack. on his Yamaha, and now that he's getting used to this Ducati. You can see in all the injuries he had last year, he's running up front. Let's see, first, second, so third. Yeah, so 4 of the top 7 were Ducati, and then you had the outliers. 1, 2, 3 were other manufacturers, were 2 KTMs and an Aprilia. So I'm sure that's kind of what they're looking for with these new rules. We'll see what it produces. In any case, I think what they're looking for is that you don't know who's going to win every week. And that is a fine goal to have. Manufacturers aren't going to see it that way because they want to dominate and win. But it's a fine goal for us that if we didn't know who was going to run up front every week. So anyway, thank you everybody for tuning in. Appreciate you guys. And yeah, hopefully on Monday we should be back. I'm going to ask Maddie if Mallory Dobbs would join us maybe for it, because Kayla will be coming off the race. I want to see where Kayla finished today. I think she finished 5th today in the rain race that they had, race number 1, and tomorrow it'll be dry. So she had tough time in qualifying, was outside of the top 10 in qualifying, but man, she made hay today while it was raining at Road America on her, let's see, her XL, I'm trying to get the name right, Rahal Ducati Moto Panigale V2, or XL Moto V2, because XL is the sponsor. But yeah, PJ ended up winning a race today. He outdragged Matthew Skoltz to the line at Road America. And man, there was some local rider named Farrell that was absolutely amazing today. And he was just, like in one of those numbers like 861, those guys who are usually at the back. He was dominating in the rain today. He drove up front, and then they had some massive red flags that he had to go back and start again. He was so upset, and then he crashed out of the second race. He got a little bit too footloose and fancy free, but what an amazing ride Farrell had on that Kawasaki today, that ZX6, man. Wow. And PJ, Kayla's teammate, was amazing today. And obviously Matthew Skoltz, he is dominant on this R6. I mean, this is the fastest track we have in Moto America. It's ironic that MotoGP is at their one of their fastest tracks in Mugello, or if not their fastest, but one of them, because obviously there's Qatar and so forth. And Moto America is at Road America. And Cam Beaubier crashed out today. He had gotten to the lead twice in that race after running off track, and then he crashed the second time, and that was that. But very high speed track for at least for our country, for Moto America. And Matthew Skoltz is just amazing on that Strock Racing, which was Squid Hunter last year, but Strock Racing R6. I mean, wow. So super sport class, look out this year with Matthew Skoltz on an R6. He looks really, really good. And to look that good on a super bike, he probably would have had a factory bike, more than likely. And, the bike that Jake Gagne and Cam Peterson, that bike is as close to a factory Yamaha as you're going to get. I mean, those bikes are amazing, and they've got so much time on them, and Richard Stamboli, and those are amazing motorcycles. Very, very tough to beat. Cameron Beaubier is amazing in this series. I got to check into his injury. Cameron Beaubier had to get lifted up off the ground today. I think he got hurt in that fall, and I hope he's okay, because for whatever difficulties that Cam had in Moto 2, he is dominant in Moto America. He took a new package, a relatively new package in BMW that he had not ridden. He got injured last year when he had crashed into somebody, and now this year, the races that he's in and he finishes, usually he wins or dominates. I mean, he is an amazing superbike rider. So hopefully he's okay. We need him to be healthy because he is one of the all-time winners in Moto America history. Anyway, thank you, everybody. Hope to see the ladies on Monday night. Maddie has committed to being here. Potentially, Kayla will be here. And I'll ask Maddie if Mallory Dobbs will join us. That would be awesome. But thank you so much for joining us. Give us a like. Give us a subscribe on X. Right there, you see it's Full Throttle Moto 31. I think we're at Throttle 31 on X or Twitter. We have a Facebook page, and hopefully we'll bring you more content because there's just nothing cooler than talking motorcycles. All right? Take care, everybody. Peace out, and one love.